He's an experienced, Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative reporter. American David Cay Johnston is also the author of The Making of Donald Trump. Published only a few months before the U.S. presidential election in 2016, the book is the result of some 30 years of digging into Trump's background, including his financial dealings and criminal connections. Trump threatened to sue. Are you more worried now for your safety or your family's safety because of what you're saying and writing?
I've done lots of dangerous things in my life. I've personally hunted down a vicious black-on-white killer and gotten an innocent man freed from prison. I've lived through a bunch of riots where I've been roughed up by black radicals, anti-war radicals, longshoremen, teamsters, cops. You know, firefighters run towards blazes. Police officers run towards gunfire. I run towards important stories. I mean, it's what I do. And if something happens to me, I can't do anything about that. But the worst thing Americans can do is to cower. That is how bullies like Donald Trump get ahead. I'm afraid, I don't want to act. And I've been calling, by the way, a lot of politicians trying to talk to them, and many of them are fearful and don't want to talk. That's how authoritarians rise. You have to be forthright and fearless, or they win.
Now, David Cay Johnston warns of an American president possibly bringing about the end of American democracy. To arm the American people, Johnston has launched a new media initiative. DCReport.org alerts the public to the actions of the current U.S. government and how to speak out against them. I'm Krystyna Henke. Join me for my interview with journalist David Cay Johnston, conducted just a few days into the presidency of Donald Trump.
If the world's greatest novelist had gone to a publisher in 2015 and said, I'm going to do my next novel about a Republican of convenience billionaire businessman who is closely involved with the Russians and who at every opportunity sings the praises of Vladimir Putin and denounces American intelligence and American military, and who conservative Republicans back and say, we're with you, we trust Vladimir Putin more than we do the CIA and the NSA and the Pentagon. I don't care if you're the greatest novelist in the world. The publisher would say, we're not giving you an advance for that because no one would believe it. And yet, this is exactly what's happened. We are now in the fourth day of an administration led by a man who has no qualifications whatsoever to hold any public office, who has spent his entire adult life lying, cheating, and stealing, embracing violent felons, being deeply involved with and doing favors for a major drug kingpin, a drug trafficker, and who has deep and not fully understood financial relationships with the Russian oligarchs, who are essentially a state-sponsored network of international criminals, and who is deeply in debt to the communist Chinese government in Beijing.
So you're making a whole bunch of statements here. How do we know that that's true?
Because everything that I write about, I can show you public record documents about Donald Trump. For example, in the case of the drug trafficker, he was photographed with Donald. There is a court record of all three of his felony convictions. He made statements to get out of prison early. He moved into Trump Tower, and there are public documents establishing that. So everything that I write about, I have documents to back it up. And I have what is, I'm pretty sure, the largest private collection of Trump documents in the world. It's tens of thousands of pages, and I have generously shared those with journalists at home and abroad.
Explain to me, though, if this information is available, and you've written about it, not just once, but many times, you've written books. The last one was The Making of Donald Trump, came out last summer. If that information is available, how is it possible that it hasn't really been talked about as much as perhaps it should have been?
Well, I've actually been on the network news in Australia, New Zealand, Japan, Canada, Britain, France, Germany, and other countries. But I've never been on the nightly news shows of ABC, NBC, and CBS, the three American commercial networks. And when PBS interviewed me and quoted me at length in one of two pieces, everything that I said about the criminal connections was edited out. Now, of course, PBS is subject to congressional pressure directly on its budget and White House pressure. Donald Trump's deep, lifelong criminal involvements have not been covered because of several horrible factors for democracy in America. First of all, there were about 60% more journalists working in America in the year 2000 than there are today. Secondly, news organizations have seen their economics collapse. When I was at the Los Angeles Times as a national correspondent, I got chewed out for not flying first class in my very first expense account. Those days are long gone. You sometimes now have trouble getting bus fare. Next, there has been a 40-plus year campaign, increasingly well-funded campaign in America by the far right, to tell people don't trust honest journalism, trust the people who manufacture lies or who distort things beyond recognition. And there is a segment of the American populace, somewhere I would guess between a fifth and a third, that embraces this because they don't want to hear news that doesn't reinforce what they wish to be true. Next, Donald Trump was great television. You know, we all slow down to look at a car accident on the other side of the highway. We call it rubbernecking. Well, Donald Trump is a car crash on the other side of the highway with dancing girls, a marching band, and fireworks. And Les Moonves, the head of CBS, said, Donald Trump may not be good for America, but he's really good for CBS profits. So there was all this uncritical coverage of him and a failure to do what's called vetting the candidate, digging into his background. So while I know things like who Obama played with as a boy in Indonesia, who were his friends in high school in Hawaii, women he dated when he was a college student, the American public doesn't know hardly anything about Donald Trump. And this is a real failure in journalism in the United States. Lots of people believe that no one looked into Obama's background, for example. Completely untrue. Plenty of material to read. Yet I get people on radio shows who call in all the time and they go, well, why didn't you check out Obama? He was thoroughly checked out. There are whole books you can read. There are public documents galore. Trump didn't get the same kind of scrutiny, and now the whole world is saddled with having this 70-year-old narcissist who has the emotional maturity of a 13-year-old boy, and who I show from his own words under oath and elsewhere literally knows nothing, being in charge of the nuclear weapons and other apparatuses controlled by the federal government. And this is a very dangerous time. But without a question, Donald Trump's background, to some degree, certainly was knowable. And I've encountered many people whose attitude is, yes, he was involved with criminals. They're all criminals. All politicians lie all the time. And not drawing distinctions between politicians trying to make themselves look good and minimize the negatives, which we all do, and Donald Trump just making up stuff. I mean, Donald Trump creates his own reality. And he lies as easily as you and I breathe because he has no moral core whatsoever. I think democracy in America has been in deep trouble for a very long time. In some elections, a majority of people eligible to vote didn't vote. Now add to that the determined efforts by the right wing in America to suppress the vote. And add to that gerrymandering, in which we create districts where you corral all the Democrats so there's a 99% or 90% likelihood of Democratic votes to concentrate them. And then add to that in America, we've had this fundamental change about politics that nobody comments on. When I was a boy in the town of Orange, in Orange County in Southern California, I remember 7 years old in the '56 election, that there was a woman at the checkout counter who wore an I Like Ike button, And in the counter next to her at the grocery store was a woman who wore an Adlai Stevenson button. And customers and people would talk about this. I didn't understand it because I was 7, but I distinctly remember this. When's the last time you saw anyone on the job wearing a button for a political candidate? In fact, in the US, it's been held that if you have a bumper sticker for a candidate, a company can fire you for putting it on the company's parking lot. We have allowed the rise of corporate power and corporate values, which, by the way, the framers of the Constitution were deeply suspicious of corporations and make no mention of them in the Constitution. We have allowed corporate values and corporate power to rise with almost no controls, and I've written whole books about this point.
So you mentioned Donald Trump is dangerous. What do you mean exactly by that?
Donald Trump has his fingers on the nuclear code. He has said, of course we're going to use nuclear weapons. Well, why do we have nuclear weapons if we're not going to use them? He said we're going to take what he calls radical Islamic terrorism and wipe it off the face of the earth. I don't know of anything that will wipe something off the face of the earth short of a nuclear weapon. A nuclear weapon, probably a tactical one rather than a strategic one, that is a small one, would, I believe, create much more violence in the world. It would enrage many, many Muslims who are not at all an issue with U.S. policies, even if those policies hurt those people. And it would benefit Vladimir Putin greatly, because if we have more war in the Middle East and we disrupt oil supplies, the Russian economy will do better. 98% of big company profits in Russia are oil and natural gas profits. Right now, prices are very low, and Putin's regime is in trouble. Trump is a hero there. It's been widely reported that they held a party celebrating his election there. So Donald Trump stands to benefit politically if he starts a war, because it will enhance his power. It will make it easier for him, if he wants to do so, to suspend the privilege of habeas corpus. That is, if you're arrested, the right to see a judge rather than be held incommunicado. And he has already described American journalism as enemies. Enemies. The only job outside of government work specified in the Constitution and protected by the Constitution. So I'm very concerned. I mean, I think it's entirely possible that we will see the end of the American democracy under Donald Trump.
And what will come in its place?
Well, Roman history tells us that you can still have a Senate. You can still have the appearance of a republic when in fact you have a dictatorship. And the key elements to whether America endures and its system of checks and balances work will be, first of all, the federal judiciary and how principled judges are. Secondly, it will be senior military commanders and whether they are loyal to the United States of America. If Donald Trump starts firing senior military officers and promoting junior officers, that is a classic millennia-old indication of a plan to seize power. So I was not going to talk or write about this unless Trump won and started actually firing generals, and yet during the election he brought it up, said, I'm going to get rid of the generals probably. And of course he claims to know more about ISIS than the generals do, which should have resulted in peals of laughter from people, as should his claim that the best advisors in the world reside in his head. Keep in mind that Donald Trump has said, as is one of his sons, that he is genetically superior to the rest of us. And he believes this. Donald believes he is superior to the rest of us. It's delusional, but he believes that, and it explains his actions. There are a lot of things that Barack Obama could have done to prevent Donald Trump from winning the Electoral College after he lost the popular vote. First of all, the President, Michelle Obama, who's probably the most popular political figure in America, could have gone on the campaign trail earlier. Secondly, they could have had a come to Jesus meeting with Hillary Clinton that saying you want to have girls be able to dream of being in the White House, a goal I find laudable, is not going to win you the votes of people you need to get to come over. He could have called to task the news media for not reporting on the substance of Hillary Clinton's speeches, and he could have, as Mrs. Clinton could have, pointed out that while Donald Trump posed as the champion of working people, he in fact said wages are too high. They also should have made a big deal out of the fact that when Donald Trump announced his candidacy in June of 2015, and this was the umpteenth time he said he was running, he was interrupted 43 times with applause when he made racist and bigoted comments. Now, this is Midtown Manhattan. This is ground zero for political correctness in America. And as I watched this on live TV, I thought, they must have bussed people in from somewhere. No, they were actors paid $50 each. Donald Trump's campaign was born of fraud. You didn't hear much from Hillary Clinton about that. They didn't buy ads telling you that. But most importantly, Hillary Clinton didn't go to places like Grand Rapids, Michigan, and Scranton, Pennsylvania, and all sorts of towns like Marysville, Ohio. And she failed to counter Trump's assertions that the whole country is in collapse and failing when, at the end of 2016, America had 82 months of consecutive private sector job growth. Government jobs were flat, and there were more private sector jobs created in America than in Canada and Europe combined, and those have bigger population than the United States. Even Obama did not get out and ballyhoo the success of that, which is just mystifying. Obama seemed to have this view that he was doing good works and people should somehow know them, and Donald Trump understands marketing, 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 promotion, 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 attack, attack, attack.
I guess the idea was that if you take the high road, you do okay. There was trust and ethics and morality.
I don't think Obama had to take a low road in order to arouse people and make them aware of the danger of Donald Trump. I think that's not at all necessary. All you had to do was get the facts out there and aggressively pursue them. Donald Trump's been involved in over 4,500 lawsuits. There are lots of people out there, and I've interviewed a lot of them, who did work for Donald Trump. They went to meet him, they delivered it, he took it from him, and then he said, I'm not going to pay you because it's no good, and then used it. And of course, if the amount of money is in the tens of thousands or even 100,000 or so, the cost of litigating to get paid will exceed what you're owed. So Trump just steals that way. And like most investigative reporters, I'm a moral scold. And I walk my talk. I conduct myself very carefully because I know I have lots of enemies. And I've now gone a half century and nobody's ever been able to tag me with anything because I don't make myself vulnerable. I pay my bills on time. I follow the law. I don't get myself into situations that are compromising. And when people like Donald Trump have tried to compromise me, as he's successfully done to other journalists, I'm aware of that, and I respond in ways that protect my absolutely unblemished reputation for integrity. Well, under a law that President Obama signed, Donald Trump could sweep me off the streets and hold me incommunicado by declaring me a terrorist, no matter how silly that is. And if we have riots in the streets in America, he could suspend the privilege of habeas corpus, that is the right to be brought before a judge. And his friends in Russia, of course, have killed a lot of people through subtle means. That is what a bully like Donald Trump wants. You will bend to me. In fact, one of his top aides said, we will all bow on our knees. No, we do not bow to presidents in America. The president is the equal of each American, temporarily imbued with certain authorities. That's all. And so I don't have any choice as to who I am but to pursue the stories that I think need to be pursued, whatever the consequences are.
So tell me about this new initiative of yours. How did that come about, that idea, and how is it going?
DCReport.org, which is a little play on David Cay and District of Columbia, and it was also a name we could clear for trademark and other purposes, is my effort to track what Donald Trump and Congress do rather than what they say. Journalists are going to do a pretty good job of covering what Trump tweets and what members of Congress say, but that doesn't matter nearly as much as what they do. So in America, if you want to change a law or a policy or a regulation, you have to reveal that in paperwork. We're going to track that paperwork. I've got about 100 volunteers who are going to divvy up the work because, many hands make the work light, and tell us when there's something that appears to be significant. I and a couple of other people, because we have hardly any money to do this, will then put out alerts to people via email. When we think it's appropriate, we will put up articles. We will distribute them for free, but with a license to other news organizations. And when the period for public comment comes, we're going to empower people. We have a web tool where you'll be able to go and put in your comments and email them as part of the official record. Government makes it hard for people to be part of the official record. We're going to make it easy to show people it's your government and you can influence your government, to empower people so that we get rid of this notion in America that, well, I can't do anything. They're just too powerful. They're too powerful. That's nonsense. You want to know about changes in government rules, regulations, policies, and laws before they become final. It takes at least 180 days from when a new regulation is first announced in writing by the government until it can take effect. And news organizations typically don't cover this at all. And if they do, they cover it by saying, this new policy took effect. No. You need to know up front what it is. And that's what we're doing. Before it's too late means we're going to tell you before this happens so that you can exercise your constitutional rights to say whatever it is. And I have no doubt that some people will go to our website and use our tool to express views like, hey, I think it's great if you take away pension guarantees, or you eliminate worker safety inspections, or you allow filthy food to be distributed because it will help corporate profits. Fine, that's fine. I'm a big free speech advocate, and I don't expect people to agree, and I'm not going to tell them what to say. What I'm going to do is see to it that they know the facts, that they can look at the actual record, and then they will have the opportunity to take part in the policies, practices, and regulatory actions of their government. I think Americans, if empowered with, here's how to do it, it's real simple, write a letter and it will go to the appropriate place using the DCReport.com web tool, I think people will begin to feel more of a sense of taking back their government, which Donald Trump says he wants, and making it responsive to them, not just to well-paid lobbyists.
So, I share your optimism. Being in the same field, I definitely think, journalism has a big role to play in educating the public and keeping this a civil society that's fair. But are you not being overly optimistic that just by writing about it, informing people that actually change will come, or that things will be fair in this society?
Well, nobody has 8 children in this society as I did without being an incurable optimist, okay? That said, the purpose of journalism is not to get people to adopt a particular viewpoint. It is to hold power to account by informing people. That's the whole basis of democratic self-governance. It is information and rational debate. Donald Trump is a threat to both of those. His campaign was born of lies. His administration right off started lying and attacking journalism. Now, I see Donald Trump in a larger context. All around the world, we are seeing the rise of fundamentalists, Hindu fundamentalists, Muslim fundamentalists, Jewish fundamentalists, Christian fundamentalists, and we're seeing the rise of populism, and that is a word that implies ignorance. And Donald Trump is part of this, and I think there is a great social wave going on around the world right now, and I think it is largely a reaction to the fact that, well, we are all dramatically better off in the modern world than we were when I was born in 1948. The pace of change and the effect it's having on human relationships is frightening to many people. And people who don't understand science, who think a theory just means somebody thinks something, could be a drunk in a bar, they're frightened by all of this. And I think those sorts of social changes are like tsunamis. You can't stop them. They have to play out until the energy is gone. My hope is that we don't lose democracy, that Vladimir Putin, who thinks democracy is a joke and you need autocratic rulers to keep people in line, don't become the norm around the world. And Canadians and Americans and Western Europeans are among a relatively small share of the world population who don't live under dictators and autocrats and places where the rule of law is for sale. So my hope is that we get through this and remain free, that the liberties of the people endure. And I recognize they may not, but it's my duty to do everything I can to do what I can to prevent a terrible outcome.